Hi, I'm Sarah Chen, and today I'm going to share a story with you. A story about how family can sometimes become your worst enemy, especially in business. For 10 years, I poured my heart and soul into our family's small tech company. I took it from a struggling startup to a $50 million enterprise. But sometimes, when you're successful, the people closest to you can be the ones who turn against you. I still remember the very beginning. Back when our family business was just a tiny computer repair shop in a strip mall. My dad started it 20 years ago. It was his pride and joy, even though it barely made enough to cover our bills. My sister Emma was always his golden child. She got straight A's, attended an elite business school, and had big dreams of working on Wall Street. I, on the other hand, was the quiet one, the one who stayed behind to help Dad with the shop, while earning my computer science degree at the local college. "Lana, you're wasting your potential here," Emma would say whenever she came home for a visit. "You should be aiming higher." But I saw something in our little shop that no one else did. Potential. While Emma was learning theoretical business models in her fancy classrooms, I was learning real-world programming, spotting gaps in the market that no one else had noticed. During my final year of college, I developed our first piece of proprietary software, a simple tool that helped small businesses manage their inventory. It wasn't groundbreaking, but it was affordable, and it worked. At first, Dad was skeptical, but when local businesses started buying licenses, his attitude began to shift. "Maybe you're onto something here, kiddo," he said one day, finally giving me the praise I had worked so hard for. Those words meant everything to me. If only I knew then how fleeting they would be. Under my guidance, the business began to grow. I worked 14-hour days, 7 days a week. Meanwhile, Emma was climbing the corporate ladder in New York. I was building something real, and every late night, every sacrifice felt worth it. Our little repair shop evolved into a software development company, attracting clients from local businesses to national corporations. But while I was busy turning a dream into reality, Mom always had her quiet concerns. "Don't forget to take care of yourself, Lana," she'd say, bringing me dinner at the office. "You need a life outside of work too." But I was driven by a vision, and maybe, deep down, by a need to prove myself to my family. 5 years into the transformation, we hit our first million in annual revenue. That's when Emma suddenly took an interest in the family business again. She quit her prestigious job in New York and moved back home. At a family dinner, she leaned back in her chair and announced, "I think it's time I took my rightful place in the company." With my business expertise, we could really take things to the next level. Dad beamed with pride. "That's wonderful, princess. We could use your professional touch around here." I sat frozen, my fork suspended in midair, trying to process what was happening. The company I had built from the ground up, the one I had sacrificed so much for, was being handed to my sister like it was her birthright. But instead of speaking up, I swallowed my objections, took a deep breath, and tried to play along. After all, family is family, right? Emma was appointed co-CEO alongside me, despite having zero experience in our industry. Dad said it would be good for the company's image to have someone with her credentials at the helm. So, we divided the responsibilities. She handled marketing and investor relations, while I focused on product development and operations. The next 5 years were a study in contrast. While I worked tirelessly, developing new software solutions and maintaining client relationships, Emma worked tirelessly to create a glamorous image for herself as the public face of the company. She gave interviews about being a woman in tech, accepted awards for entrepreneurship, and took credit for innovations that my team and I had created. Our revenue continued to rise, reaching 50 million annually, but so did the tension between us. It didn't take long before Emma started to push me out. She began excluding me from key meetings, making decisions without consulting me, and gradually sidelining me in the company I had built from nothing. But it all came to a head at Dad's 60th birthday party, the day everything changed. The party was Emma's idea, of course. She rented the grand ballroom at the city's most expensive hotel and invited every business associate she could think of. It was less of a birthday celebration and more of a networking event, but that was Emma's style. Everything had to serve a purpose. I arrived early to help with the preparations, wearing a simple black dress. Emma immediately took issue with it. "Couldn't you have made more of an effort?" she hissed, eyeing me like I was a disappointment. "These are important people coming tonight." I ignored her and focused on greeting the guests as they arrived. The room quickly filled with business associates, clients, and family friends. Emma worked the room like a politician, while I stayed in the background, making sure everything went smoothly. Then, during dinner, Emma stood up to make a speech. I expected the usual, a tribute to Dad, maybe some childhood memories. But instead, she dropped a bombshell that shattered everything. "As we celebrate Dad's 60th birthday," she began, her voice cutting through the air, "I think it's time to announce some changes at Chen Technologies. The board has agreed that the company needs unified leadership to move forward." My heart stopped. Board meetings? What board meetings? For too long, we've been held back by outdated thinking and resistance to change, Emma continued, locking eyes with me. "That's why, effective immediately, I will be taking over as sole CEO. It's time for certain elements that are no longer serving our growth to step aside." The room erupted in murmurs, but I stayed frozen, unable to process what was happening. Emma was dismantling everything I had built, right in front of everyone. "Some people," she said, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy, "are better suited to technical roles rather than leadership. My sister Lana has been adequate in maintaining our legacy systems, but to compete in today's market, we need vision. We need excellence. And frankly, Lana, you're just not cut out for this level of business." I glanced at Dad, hoping, praying that he would stand up for me. Instead, I saw him nodding along, a proud smile on his face. Mom sat at the table, her hands trembling slightly, not meeting anyone's eyes. "The truth is," Emma continued, her voice growing sharper, "you're worthless in today's business world, Lana. Your old-fashioned ideas and lack of formal business education have become a liability. It's time for you to step aside, gracefully." The silence in the room was deafening. Hundreds of eyes turned to me, waiting for me to respond. I could feel the pity, the judgment, the scorn. Everything I had built, every late night, every sacrifice was being stripped away, publicly, humiliatingly, and without warning. I stood up slowly. The scrape of my chair against the floor echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. Everyone expected a scene, tears, maybe a shouting match. But instead, I simply picked up my purse, walked over to Dad's table, and placed a small wrapped package in front of him. "Happy birthday, Dad," I said quietly, my voice steady. Then I turned and walked out of the ballroom, head held high, leaving behind the whispers and stares. That night, as I sat in my home office, surrounded by awards and patents bearing my name, I made a decision. Emma thought she had won, but she had forgotten one crucial detail, something that would turn her moment of triumph into the biggest mistake of her life. As I powered up my laptop and began typing, a small smile played on my lips. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. After all, there's more than one way to run a successful business. And I'd learned more in 10 years than Emma had learned in all her fancy business classes. The next morning arrived, bright and clear. I was already in the office before anyone else, waiting. At precisely 9:00 a.m., Emma strode through the front doors with Dad beside her. Both wore triumphant smiles, but neither of them knew their victory was about to be wiped clean from their faces. "Sarah?" Emma's voice was a mix of surprise and annoyance. "What are you doing here? I thought after last night you'd have the dignity to stay home." I smiled, remembering the email I had sent at 3:00 a.m. to every major client, partner, and employee of Chen Technologies. "Just wrapping up some loose ends, sister dear. But since you're here, we should probably talk about the company's future." "There's nothing to discuss," Dad interjected, his voice firm. "Emma's in charge now. The board has already approved it." "Yes, the board," I said, pulling out my tablet. "Let's talk about that." I tapped the screen, and the conference room's main screen lit up with a document. You see, while Emma was busy planning parties and giving interviews, I was actually building this company. And there are a few things you both seem to have forgotten. I tapped again, and the document expanded, highlighting the key details. First, let me remind you that I own 51% of Chen Technologies shares. When we incorporated 10 years ago, Dad gave Emma and me equal shares of 25% each, keeping 50% for himself. But 3 years ago, when we needed capital for expansion, Dad sold me 6% of the shares. Remember that day, Dad? You were too busy attending Emma's awards ceremony to handle the negotiations yourself. So you signed the papers without reading them carefully. The colour drained from both their faces. Emma's perfectly manicured hands gripped the conference table as her voice barely whispered, "That's impossible. Dad would never..." I continued, feeling the weight of the moment. And that's not all. I tapped again, bringing up more documents on the screen. The core software that generates 80% of our revenue is not owned by Chen Technologies. It's owned by my separate company, Innovate Solutions LLC. Chen Technologies only has a licensing agreement which expires... I glanced at my watch. About 10 minutes ago. Dad collapsed into a chair, realization dawning on his face. The renewal papers, the ones you asked me to sign last week? The ones you were too busy to read because you were helping Emma plan the party? Yes, those papers. I paused, letting the silence stretch. I decided not to submit them. Emma's face twisted with rage. "You underhanded little..." "Careful, sister," I interrupted, my voice cold. "You might want to hear the rest before you finish that sentence." I paused, letting the room sit in silence. While you were busy announcing my supposed graceful exit last night, I was sending emails to our clients. You see, most of our major clients have personal loyalty clauses in their contracts with Chen Technologies, clauses they signed because of me, my expertise, and my track record. I pulled up my email and showed her the dozens of responses that had already flooded in. Would you like to know how many have already triggered their contract termination clauses? Or how many of our top developers, who by the way, are actually employed by Innovate Solutions, have already accepted positions at my new venture? The room fell deadly silent. Through the glass walls, we could see employees gathering outside the conference room, whispers spreading like wildfire as they checked their emails. Emma's composure cracked as she frantically checked her phone, her hands trembling. "You can't do this," she stammered. The company you tried to steal from me." I finished her sentence, my voice cutting through the air. "The company you thought you could just take over because you have an MBA and Dad's approval? That company ceased to exist the moment you decided to humiliate me in front of everyone we know." I stood up, smoothing my dress as I surveyed the room, the weight of the moment settling over me. "So here are your options," I continued, the finality of my words hanging in the air. Option 1. I walk away with my shares, my software, my clients, and my employees. Chen Technologies becomes an empty shell, and you can explain to all those important people you invited last night why the company's value dropped to zero overnight. Dad's face had aged a decade in the last 10 minutes. He sank back into his chair, his voice weak. "And option 2? "Option 2, I said, with a smirk that felt more like a final verdict, "is that you both resign. I take full control of Chen Technologies. You keep your shares as silent partners, receiving dividends but having no say in operations. Emma gets a nice severance package and glowing references for her next job, somewhere far away from here." Emma's face flushed a deep red. "You planned this all along, didn't you? You've just been waiting for the right moment to stab us in the back." I laughed, but it was bitter, without humour. "No, Emma. I spent 10 years trying to be a good daughter and sister, while you both took me for granted. I built this company from nothing while you collected accolades for my work. I only planned this." I glanced at my watch. "About 12 hours ago, after you called me worthless in front of everyone we know." My phone buzzed. A client termination notice. The clock was ticking. "Time's running out. What's it going to be?" I asked, my voice as cold as the steel in my chest. The next hour was a blur of paperwork, lawyers, and hasty decisions. By noon, I sat alone in what was now my office, overlooking the city below. The company I had built was finally, truly mine. But the victory felt hollow. The family relationships I had tried to protect lay in ruins. Trust shattered like dropped crystal. That evening, Mom came to see me. Her eyes were red from crying, her face drawn. "Did it have to end this way?" she asked softly. I exhaled slowly, the weight of everything settling in. "They gave me no choice," I replied, my voice gentle but firm. "They would have taken everything I built and discarded me without a second thought." She nodded slowly, understanding but sad. "What happens now?" I showed her the plans I had already drawn up. Expansions, new product lines, innovations I had been holding back. Now, I build something even bigger. But this time, I do it without having to carry people who see me as worthless. Over the next year, under my sole leadership, Chen Technologies tripled in value. Emma found a job with a startup in Silicon Valley, humbled but hopefully wiser. Dad retired, finally understanding that his golden child had nearly destroyed his legacy. We see each other at holidays now, maintaining a polite distance that masks the wounds that may never fully heal. Sometimes, late at night, I find myself staring at old family photos, feeling a twinge of sadness for what we lost. But then, I remember that night at the birthday party, the look of disdain on Emma's face, the way Dad nodded along with her cruel words. In both business and family, respect is earned, not given. They learned that lesson too late. As for me, I learned that the quiet ones, the ones dismissed as worthless, are often the ones you should watch out for. We're the ones who know how to build something from nothing, and when others try to steal it, we know exactly how to take it all back. My story spread through business circles like wildfire, a cautionary tale about underestimating the wrong person. These days, when I attend industry events, I often catch whispers. "That's Sarah Chen, the one who..." They never finish the sentence, but they don't have to. My success speaks for itself. Last week, I received an invitation to speak at Emma's business school graduation ceremony. The topic: Hidden Strengths, the Power of Underestimated Leaders. I accepted with a small smile, already planning my speech. After all, I have quite the story to tell. The company continues to thrive under my leadership. But more importantly, I found peace with my decisions. Sometimes the strongest message you can send is simply proving people wrong. The best revenge isn't about destroying others. It's about rising so high that they can't help but see their own mistakes. As I sit here, writing this from my office overlooking the city, I'm reminded of something my mother once told me. Success is the best revenge, but wisdom is knowing when to stop seeking revenge and start seeking growth. She was right. I've moved past the need for revenge. Now, my focus is on building something meaningful, something that will outlast the petty jealousies and family dramas. I still keep that wrapped birthday present I never gave Dad, a photo album of the company's journey, from that tiny repair shop to where it is today. Maybe, someday, when the wounds have healed enough, I'll finally give it to him. Until then, it serves as a reminder that our greatest strengths often come from the very things others underestimate about us.